Today's guest is somebody who holds a very special place in my heart. And the reason she holds such a special place in my heart is because she is my first ever virtual kettlebell client. So before the pandemic, she used to work out with me at a luxury gym in New York City. She was a really dedicated client. I remember there was a chunk of time where I taught 7 classes in a row on a Sunday, and she would take 3 of my classes back to back. She was somebody who was always working really hard in class and trying to get the most out of it. And then when the pandemic happened, she reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I see you're doing this stuff with the kettlebells. Do you think you could teach me?" And she was so generous to let me share so much of her journey on social media that I really do believe a lot of women who have decided to work with me chose to work with me not only because they have seen me walk the walk and talk the talk, but they've also seen people like her demonstrate what is possible when you are willing to invest in yourself. And today, our focus on this conversation is going to be around the topic of transformation. And I'm so excited to welcome Sophia to the Dangerous Women podcast. Welcome to the Dangerous Women podcast, where the intersection of fierceness and femininity fuels empowerment. Our goal is to provide women with insights to unleash their power. Grounded in the 7 principles of self-confidence, we guide women to embrace their duality, delicate as a flower, yet powerful as a bomb. I'm your host, Colleen Conlon, inviting you to join me as we explore topics on health and wellness, empowering you to embody the essence of your dangerous woman. So we had a little talk in a workout recently around the phoenix. And for anybody who's listening, the phoenix is a mythological creature that will literally live like 500 years and then set itself on fire so that it can rebirth into a new cycle of life. And this was something that stuck out to you to the point where you shot me a text message afterwards. So how does the phoenix resonate with you, Sophia?
I think that, I've been doing a lot of reflecting in particular, in the last few years, in particular in the last few months, as I transition into this next chapter of my career and my personal life and physically moving to a new place. And I think when you were coaching us through this workout and was hearing you, talk about what a phoenix is, and also this concept that, I think often we hear this idea that, okay, well, in order to get through something hard, you have to just, push through and you'll find yourself again. The pieces that you felt like were missing, you'll come out of it stronger. And while I think that can be true, I think that there's also an element, especially I feel like it's what I went through in the last few months, where it was sometimes a piece of you, a part of you has to go away or has to die in order for you to come out in the version of yourself that you want to. And so this idea of like rebirth versus just rebuilding really stuck out to me, because I think it almost validated that feeling that I had of, okay, it's okay that this version of myself or parts of myself that I thought were core to who I am have now changed or have died, so to speak, but then new parts have emerged and it's given way for new parts to emerge. And so, yeah, it really spoke to me in the workout, but also afterwards as I was reflecting on this sort of pivotal transition in my life.
And I will say, from the first time I met you I think I met you in a spin studio. Was that our first class together? Yeah.
I was taking your spin classes and the 6 stations, and it was like, you were
Whipped.
so intense. And I was like, I love her. Oh yeah, whipped. I was like, I was like, I gotta go because I work the hardest when I'm in those classes.
Oh my gosh, that was a time. That was a time.
Yeah.
But from knowing you back then to knowing you now, there's been a lot of transformation that's taken place. I mean, we have seen it. We've seen it really clearly from, you being on the spin bike or taking that whipped class where we are doing jump squats in whipped, right? To, you're doing Turkish get up with 70 pounds. You're snatching 55 pounds. You have just turned into this really strong, badass kettlebell queen. I've seen your body change, and that's just kind of scratching the surface. I think the cool thing about
Mm.
working out is, we really do get to see in a tangible way how much stronger we get or how the body can change, but we don't necessarily get to see what's changing in a personal life or career or what's going on in your head that is different. Can shed some light for us when we look back to, those days in the group fitness studio? Like, where were you at in comparison to where you are now?
I think I would start by saying something I've learned is that it's not all linear. So it's not all, I think when I started working with you more one-on-one with the kettlebell, I'm really focusing on, strength training. I felt like that over the course of a year, I felt like the ways that I was pushing boundaries when I was training with the bells, um, I could see that in my life more tangibly, like in the workplace where I felt more comfortable taking up space or, and asking questions, sharing my ideas. And I think there was a level of confidence that emerged from feeling like I could do hard things. And somehow with strength training, when you do it physically, I think that it somehow it made it easier for me to do that sort of emotionally and mentally and in my the rest of my world. And so I think that sort of immediate burst of confidence really helped me as I sort of hit my mid-20s and got further along in my career and started, exploring new relationships, making new friends, having some of my first romantic relationships. And so it gave me that confidence. And then, and then to me, it was sort of in my mind, I was like, okay, it's only going to go up from here, and then life happens and you hit bumps along the way. And I think that was a lesson learned. It doesn't mean that you didn't make progress to that, that version of yourself that you worked on for the first few years of your 20s isn't still there, isn't still the foundation, but it's okay that sometimes you dip and something happens or, you kind of feel lost again. I always joke that sort of in the mid 20s to late 20s, I sort of felt like I was in my teenage years again of like, who am I? What's my identity? What do I want to do with my life? And what I found was like, getting back into it's been pretty consistent with say strength training, but really honing back in on strength training and skill building allowed me to just have that consistency and that like rock in my life. Whereas everything else felt out of control, but I could kind of control this element of like consistency and showing up for myself. And, particularly over the last few months when I've struggled to as making this big life transition, I think for me, leaning on some of the values that I've seen myself bring to my training, whether it's, consistently certainly being one of them, being courageous, taking risks, it's really helped me, my mindset and some of the challenges that have come my way. And, I do think that some of the pieces of me I had to sort of leave behind, but I think I've been able to sort of rebuild stronger into someone that I'm more proud of. And I definitely think being able to embody that in a physical practice has really helped me then be able to do it and apply that into my everyday life.
You made a comment just now about having the courage to do this stuff. And, there were definitely times where I've, seen you working with the kettlebell where I know I can probably do this, but it's kind of scary. But you still go after it, you do it anyway. Have you felt that in other areas of life, doing something where this seems kind of scary, but I'm just going to do it anyway because I believe deep down that I actually can?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest, I have lots of examples of that, but the biggest example would probably be this career transition that I'm making. I was on a path and things were going well, and I knew that that I had this sort of feeling of deep down I wanted to, maybe not that deep down, but I had this passion of wanting to transition into medical, to being a medical provider, specifically to being a midwife. And it was sort of that tension of, well, the hard path is definitely choosing the midwifery path, because I'm like uprooting my life. I'm going back to school in my 30s. I'm changing paths when things are actually like pretty comfortable, and I've like finally figured stuff out in my current career. And so, it was a moment that was over the course of a few months, but it was definitely that, okay, I can take this risk and not have regrets, and it's going to be hard and certainly challenging, or I can stay here and make the best of my current situation, which is pretty good, but know that I have these like bigger goals that I want to achieve. And so I think that for me is like the one that stands out the most. Taking the hard path, knowing that I can do it, but knowing that, I don't want to limit myself or have regrets by not taking that next step. And so I've been working towards this transition for the last couple of years, and now it's actually happening.
I think that's so
And
cool.
I will also say,
Yeah.
another example is, like, I remember when we were talking early on when we were working together, I feel like I have all these goals and I say I want to do these things, but then I haven't followed through on them, and whether early on that was as I began my like side hustle as a doula. And I remember we sat down together and we like actually, you were like physically write out the goals, and then also what are the steps you're going to take to get there. And in some ways it was very much, okay, I've done this actually with this, how I approached like strength training, kettlebell training. It was like, okay, I can't get when I first started off, I didn't know how to do a snatch, but like, what are the steps you need to get there? And that's literally how I approached like becoming a doula, and now this transition to midwifery school. And it feels really overwhelming at the beginning, but when you break it down, it's still overwhelming, but you're like, okay, I can actually do this, and you're one step closer. And so it's actually so like, I'm just blown away about how similar, yeah, the coaching that I've given me, but also just like in general the strength training that I've done, specifically with the kettlebell, but just in general like strength training, how that has transferred, how the things that I've learned from that have transferred over into my life so well. And yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about like how intertwined those are. And my mindset like about strength training is totally different, in the sense that I actually do it now less for the, like, when I first started, I was like, oh, I want to be in shape, I want to get strong, and those are still like important things to me. But now I'm like, I do it because I know when I show up in the training, I will also show up differently in my life. And so it's like my entire mindset around how and why around the training is totally different than what it was when we started.
That is really cool. Can you tell us more? At what point in time did that switch for you?
I would say so. Like, to paint a picture of the sort of path, it would be like the first year, it was actually the year of the 2020 year, everything changed. I, my main goal was to like, I was trying to just see physical change in my body. And I had that moment of, I'm like, I didn't want to really say it, or I was like kind of embarrassed to say it, but it's because I felt like it wasn't okay to be like, hey, I want to see like a physical change in my body. Because I thought of myself as this like strong, confident person, even though I wasn't necessarily. But I was like, I don't want to, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that's what I want. But ultimately, that was my goal. I was focused on like getting stronger, yes, but also getting into, changing my body. And then for a period of time, once I sort of hit that goal, and I was just sort of maintaining that, and it was more like skill-based goals, and that really allowed me to have some purpose and something to focus on outside of my professional goals. And so then it became really about, like, can I do sinister, how many pull-ups, like the weighted pull-ups, all those sort of like skills that I was working on. And so that was sort of that phase of my training of like really
Mm.
focused on, totally led by skills, really want to prove to myself that I can do these things. I never thought I'd be able to do a pull up, and now I can do 10, And so like really focus on that. And then I would say the last like year or two, it's been much more just about like, how can training complement the rest of my life? And so that means that sometimes I'm training less intensely. I'm just focused on, on getting the moves and the skills into my body. I'm not focused on going up in weight or reps, but it's really just been, how can I use this as a way to make me feel my best self? Like, know that I can, keep up my strength, show up in the way that I want to for others by sort of filling my own cup. And so, yeah, it's been interesting to see how that transformation has happened of like it served a different purpose. Ultimately, it's always to take care of myself and be my strongest, healthiest version. But like sometimes it hasn't been my number one priority. It's just been like a complement to the rest of my life. And I think that's really important in how it's been able to ebb and flow and be really sustainable. Like it doesn't, I think I had this fear when I first started off as if I'm not training 5 days a week as intensely in these and even workouts, I'm not gonna be able to keep this up, but I am, yeah, I maybe don't do that right now, but at certain points I have the time and the energy, and at some points I don't, but I'm confident now in my own body and in tune to know what I need. And so that's been a really cool thing about training and kind of figuring out what I need for myself at each point in time.
And that makes me think back to the Phoenix. You have all of these different seasons of life, these different cycles, these opportunities to rebirth where, that maybe there is a time where the goal is really focused on, getting in those sessions intensely 5 times a week. And then that's no longer the priority for the next season because you're working on leveling up in another way. I would imagine getting ready to go to midwifery school, like that is going to become a primary focus for this next cycle of life. And in that case, there's different things that need to shift, and that's really cool. I think a lot of people, they kind of get stuck when they see everything as like, I need to do all of the things and I need to do them all at the same time. But it's if you can just learn, like you can take a season to really learn how to implement these habits, learn how to strength train, learn how to take care of your body. These habits are now like ingrained into you where you can step away, you can prioritize something else, and you can trust that you're not going to lose that part of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I feel that I've been tested, like I've tested that over the past couple of years. Of, okay, well, I haven't, like now coming back into this training cycle, we're working on power. I haven't snatched and, or at least snatched, I've been in previous cycles over the past year, we've done some light snatches for endurance, but like I haven't snatched anything like big or big for me in years, honestly. And knowing that I could like, the first time I did it a couple of weeks ago, okay, no, it was still a little rocky, but like just 2 or 3 weeks into a program, getting back into it. Okay, I got this. And so, and now I can be back where I am, but also in a stronger place because I have like flawless life experience since last time I was snatching. And it was like the fears I had about snatching that had nothing to do with my strength. That's not even something I think about now. It's like crazy. I can't get over that. It's just been this weird sort of like, how was I so scared 2 years ago to do this, and now it's the same thing, same weight. Like I'm probably, I haven't been training as intensely as I was during that period, but somehow it's just like back in my body. So yeah, I definitely think that now I'm much more in tune to, okay, sometimes it's like I need to just push because I know I'll be proud of myself if I push through it. And sometimes I just need to sleep the extra hour. And if you would have talked to, 20, even like 26, I'm now almost 30. If you would talk to 26, 27-year-old Sophia, I would have been like, doesn't matter if I have a meeting at 7, I must wake up at 4 to get it done or, whatever. And it was like, that for that season of my life, like it established a lot of good habits and discipline. But now I'm like, okay, like I think now I would probably choose to take that as a rest day, And so I think, yeah, but knowing that if I wanted, whenever I have a goal again or want to reprioritize and I am able to, like, I know that I have and knowing what I need to do to get there. And also, I think the way that like fueling and recovery and rest have support that. Like I'm really, especially as I get older, I feel like when I could get away with it when I was in my early 20s, okay, I didn't really eat a granola, didn't have what I really need, and I could still go and do a workout session. Now I'm like, okay, I know that if I want to train effectively, like I need to do all these things. And so yeah, and it's definitely been a process of trial and error, and also being inspired honestly from the community, like the Black and Gold. And I remember when so the person in our cohort, we were both freaked out about doing this, and now she's got the skill. Like it gave me the encouragement this week to try for the 24 kg snatch. So, you know, I do think community is super important for me in all aspects of my life. But I think, yeah, it's actually like through strength training that I realized how much of that community, how much community was so important to me. It was through those initial times during COVID when I was like, wow, this is what keeps me grounded. And now I really seek out community in different parts of my life. And so I think that's a really important addition to what I've learned from or how I've evolved over the last few years.
So getting to be with other people, and I would imagine too, it's even, to what you were saying before, seeing other people transform it helps, I think, to remind you that no, you're capable of continuing to push as well. I think it can be really hard to take yourself to the next level if you haven't seen anybody else do it. And sometimes you have to be that pioneer, like you have to be the one who chooses to go first. But it can definitely feel a lot less intimidating when you get to go with the pack. You made a comment before that I would love to touch upon because I think a lot of women have felt this way at some point in life where, early on in your transformation, you made a comment about feeling like uncomfortable to have a goal that was around changing your body. Do you feel like transforming into the woman you are now, that wouldn't phase you the same way, or is that not fully accurate? If you have a goal to change your body, if you have a goal to, do anything, are you going to let society make you feel like maybe I shouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's changed the way I think about it. In particular, I think I had this sense of like, I want these things and I have these goals, I've always been someone who's worked hard for things, but I don't want to I want to pretend that it just happened, at least that's how sometimes it feels like when you see other people, they're just like, they got to the top, it just happened, or like I don't know, somehow. And I think especially for women there's this sense of like we want to make it look like effortless. My like advisor at school used to say like women, particularly women in their 20s, are often like ducks like floating on water, where it's like at the top, you just see them gliding on the water and they don't look like they're doing much, it's like effortless, and then underneath they're like paddling to stay up to keep moving forward. And so I think about that and me as that duck of okay, I have these goals, but I didn't want to necessarily, yeah, I was scared to sort of talk about them because I didn't want to normalize having to work so hard for everything, I guess. And now I'm like, it's actually, I want you to know that I worked really darn hard to achieve this goal or to do this things. Like things don't come easily, and certain things come easily for certain people and harder for others, and everyone's different. But to your point about my mindset transformation around that, it's been more about I want people to know that things take time, that it's hard, and I'm proud of myself for all that effort that goes into the building of that skill or the goal. And so I'm like not as self-conscious about sharing the process anymore. And I think it's really important that we do share it more with each other because I think it normalizes it. And that for me is part of the seeing people and hearing people share their, as it relates to at least the kettlebell and training, like hearing them talk about sort of all the work they were putting in and seeing it in action, it normalized it. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to do, not just for strength training, but in general. Good things take really hard work, and it's okay that it's okay that it takes really hard work and that it doesn't come easily. That's normal, and that's part of like why goals are so exciting, is because you put so much into it.
Kettlebell Catalyst, the exercise guide for women to build strength, lean muscle, and self-confidence to overcoming limiting beliefs, is a book I wrote for women to be empowered to get started with kettlebells. In this book, not only will you learn the 101 details of hardstyle kettlebell technique, but you will also meet lots of women who were brave enough to try using kettlebells and hear how they transformed both physically and mentally. To buy your copy, visit Amazon or Barnes & Noble today.
I don't think I've ever been excited about something that's been big unless I really had to work my butt off for it. And I've had some moments in life where something big, has happened. And I'm like, this is really cool, but it doesn't hold the same kind of weight versus something
Mhm.
that took a significant amount of time to achieve. Can you resonate with
Yeah,
that at all?
definitely. Yeah, no, it feels there's something about the process that what has gone into this. You earned it too. Like I think there's a level of, earn and doesn't mean that everything in life should be difficult, but I think like the big exciting goals that you set for yourself, I think that's part of it is knowing, having something that feels a little bit far away in the sense that it's not something you could do from one day to the next, but you know that you have either or you have people who believe in you. And sometimes that happens. It's like people believe in you before you believe in yourself to make it happen. But yeah, it's like the process that's so exciting, I think. And I wouldn't have said that if you asked me even a couple of years ago. I'd be like, no, great if I could just do the snatch without having to put in the work, great. But I think that's ultimately like what makes, yeah, when you reflect back on it, it's wow, you set yourself up. I think for me, it was this, I was feeling so stuck. I have these goals, but I'm not doing anything about it. I'm not like taking the steps to actually start working on it. And so it's somehow, yeah, I finally got out of that rut. It doesn't mean it never happens to me ever now. Like obviously there's still things where I'm like, ooh, I want to start working on that. But in general, I feel much more like confident about, okay, if this is something I want to do, it might mean that I'm gonna have to readjust a little or change priorities a bit, but I can do this. And it's a really powerful thing, I think, to know that you have the capacity and the ability to like change something in your life. And whether that's your body or whether that's, in your strength or whether that's something at work or in your personal life. Yes, there's a lot of things in this world that are out of our control, unfortunately, but we also do a lot of control. And I think that's what I've learned about myself. And like I feel like that's why I keep coming. I know it's not all about training, but I keep coming back to that because it's, okay, you have so much having control over my breath, over like the little things that ultimately make a big difference. And I just really try to channel that, and somehow channeling it from training to life is easier for me, or not easier, but it comes more. I've been able to make more progress than trying to take it from other parts of my life and apply it. It just feels so connected to me, the training and my personal and professional life. And so that's why I keep it up, and that's why I don't switch to other things or start running to get like other. This particular type of training is just like really reminds me, like when I get into it in the mornings or when I train, I'm like, okay, I've got control over this, or okay, I didn't get it this time, but it's okay, I'm going to focus on the technique. Just the mindset of when I have in training helps me so much when I go about my day.
I think for me, because I can relate to that wholeheartedly, everything that I've learned in strength training has helped me to believe it's possible to reverse engineer any goal
Mm-hmm.
within business or within relationships to achieve whatever it is you are trying to achieve. And I think it's because when it comes to strength training, I want to be careful not to call it an even playing field, but I think it is something that is more even a playing field than other things because you go into the gym. And yes, some people have genetics that are going to help predispose them to being better at something in the beginning, but you have to keep putting in those reps. And it's very objective. Either you're putting in the work and you can do it, or you're not putting in the work and you can't do it. Whereas I think there's some other things that are a little bit more subjective. It makes me think back to theater days where it's, yeah, I might work really hard to get the role, but, you know, should I have gotten the role over somebody else who was just as talented? There's something subjective about being able to achieve something like that. Whereas with strength training, it's either I put the reps in to be able to do the thing and somebody else as well. Like you're either doing the thing, achieving the thing, or you're not, so you don't. And I think because it is so objective, it's easy to approach other things in life from that logical perspective.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think the other thing sort of that is, as you were talking, that made me think is like, it's also really helped me with checking, I know we say in training a lot, like check your ego, or just, don't let your ego get in the way. And I think for me, that is such a, yeah, being able to do, it's actually really hard for me, the pushing, once I've gotten into the habit, and because I get so excited, I'm like, I do this work and then this, and then I get the skill, it's not that it comes easy, but it's, you put in the work, you do the program, and then you achieve this goal. And so now I've sort of been, the last few months, I've sort of struggled a little bit on the other side, where I've been like, I'm so used to like pushing for a goal, and knowing, or just, going at my max, because knowing that I can, and I want to show up fully and all of this. And then the last, 6 months or so, and I've obviously had periods throughout the years that have challenged me in different ways, but like, where like a lot of different things, a lot of life things happened to me at once, where I was like, I can't show up at 100%. And instead of being like, let me try to show up at 100% and then disappoint myself in the sessions because I'm not fueled enough, or I'm not sleeping enough, or I'm just tired, or whatever it is, whatever the things are, I'm just stressed. Like, instead of doing that, I'm just going to scale back intentionally. And I think that was a really like powerful thing for me. Okay, I'm scaling back because I'm making the decision that I'm going to focus on technique and not getting hurt, and just doing some of the basics, going back to the basics, so that I keep up this thing that is really important, is constant in my life, training that is really important to me, from a like just overall health and well-being standpoint. But I don't need to be chasing things. I don't need to be going all out. And so I guess just to sort of say, I think it can go both ways in really productive ways. It can be like helping you push and achieve goals. And I think it's helped me like, okay, in my life, and also step back in my own life outside of training, and be like, okay, it's okay that I'm not like, I don't need to be productive all the time. I don't really need to be going 100%. It's okay that I take days of rest to full, both physically and, work wise. And so I think, yeah, it's been cool to sort of see how it's worked in both directions, not just in the go.
Yeah, I think, in order to transform, it's not just about having the grit to push through it. It's about also embracing the grace that you need to give yourself so that you can transform. It's such a balance between the two. And I think that people who really do such a beautiful job with transformation, and not just like in one aspect, but being able to transform things more in different aspects of life, it's because they figured out how to marry grit and grace to transform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I really, I never really understood what like I'd heard people talk about embodiment, and, embodying words or phrases, or like a sense, or like a character or something, but I didn't like really know like what that meant. And so it was actually only in this last training block of working together, that I was like, oh, because I started to apply those words to not just training, but other parts of my life, like the sort of words that are seemingly opposite, or at least feel opposite to me, whether it's like grit and grace, or like soft. I was thinking like soft and badass, like things like that, where it's nice to finally be in a place where where I can feel like I can fully own all of those, or both of those, I should say, and they can coexist. And yeah, it's like something about like physically embodying them during the training, because I had talked about it, like when I had done a couple of sessions of therapy, like someone had said that, and I was like, I don't get it. How do you just embody it? You just like snap your fingers and body. But when you physically do it in your training, it feels so much more tangible. And then again, it's like easier to translate that to at least I find it easier to then translate that skill of embodiment to other parts of my life. And so I think that's really helped me in terms of this, as we talk about transformation and growth. It's like being able to have things coexist, having two things be true at the same time, like being someone who's go-getter, I want to be known, I identify as that, and I want to be like recognized for that and validated for that in terms of who I am and what I want to do and achieve. But also I want, like, this sort of softer, sillier side of me is still very much there, and I don't want to feel like I have to hide it, or only focus on one or the other, that I can actually coexist in various situations. So yeah,
I really love how you brought all of the stuff up around embodiment. And I remember when I was in school for theater, we did embodiment practices all the time. And I didn't realize this until last year because I was in a container with all of these women, and the woman in charge of the container would have us do all of these embodiment practices around the different female archetypes. And I was like, I actually know exactly what this is. And in theater school, when we would try to create a character, we would be coached through, how does this character walk? You know, are you leading with your chin? Are you leading with your breasts? Are you leading with your left pinky? Like, how does this character walk? Okay, how does this character breathe? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it up in the chest? Is it down in the stomach? And when you start to tap into thinking about, well, how does this character that I'm trying to create move? You shift, you change. It's still you, but it's as if you are moving through the embodiment of what it is you're trying to create with this character. And what was really cool in this woman's practice is she would describe the different characteristics of these different female archetypes. And as she's, you know, describing these different qualities, you're just moving in the space and you notice I'm a little bit lighter, or maybe I'm a little bit heavier, or maybe I'm like in a state of rage, or maybe I'm just like, I feel like I'm floating. And I remember starting to think, you know, why can't we apply this to working with the kettlebells? And I started implementing that with some of my clients. And it was so cool to see how, you know, you could pick a word like savage and you could pick something opposite. One of the women that me and Sophia, she almost always goes to the word savage and her opposing word is sexy. And you see her moving really strong when she's tapping into the embodiment of savage. And then there's just something kind of soft about her when she taps into the word sexy. And what I think is so cool about an embodiment practice when it comes to working out is how you can then apply it to other areas of life. So like everything that we've already talked about today, Sophia, transformation, like seeing the change, we see it in the gym. We see it from showing up and putting in the reps. So why would embodying a word be any different? I don't know about you, but I have since then recently started taking a word or taking two opposing words to go into other aspects of my life where I'm like, this is how I want to show up. It's me. I'm not wearing a mask, but I'm leading with these qualities of a particular word. And the words that I really like gravitating towards are fierce and grace. So there's something where I try to show up like really strong and really sharp and on top of my shit, but there's something softer to my approach. There's something kind of gentle and kind, where these words feel very opposing, but I feel like when embodying them, it kind of just blends the best of two different vibes. It's cool. Have you noticed doing that in any other aspect of life as all of this has been unfolding for you?
Yeah, I have. And actually, if I may, I think it's really cool to hear, before I tell you about mine, I think it's really cool to hear about the way that you just described that, because I have been thinking about how, like, when I first met, you, and like the reason I kept coming to your classes is because you were, you were like, I liked the kind of drill sergeant, what I felt like was sort of that fierce, take no shit, obviously you cared a lot about everyone having a really good, strangely not doing like all the things all the other coaches were doing just because that's like the thing to do in group fitness classes, but like really taking skills and implementing them even in a group fitness setting. But I remember, you being like, yeah, like being known as the like really tough, still nice, but like really intense. And I've seen you like transform as I worked with you in different ways. And then, when I wasn't working with you for a bit and then came back, like seeing how you transformed your coaching to, there's still that very, like, you care a lot about technique and a lot about the things that are, obviously to keep us safe and to keep us like progressing. But there's this other side of you that has totally, it's exactly what you just described, like the two vibes meshing of like, that fierceness is still there, but then you have this like gentle, like kind part that I know was always there, but like now you mesh so well in your coaching style. So it's just cool to hear you describe it, because I, as a student of yours and as, as someone who's worked with you in different capacities for a while, have totally seen that come to life. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say for me too, I think sometimes it's easier, like you said, it's not like we're putting on a mask. It's not like embodying is being someone you're not. But I think sometimes it is easier to sort of think of it as a separate, or like a third person, or a quality outside of you that you can then like put on or act in. And it somehow, until it becomes organic, like I feel like now some of those words I've been using have become more like organically part of me. But especially at the beginning, when you're trying to embrace them, it can feel a little bit awkward if it's something that, something that feels very bold, or like, something you're kind of like trying on. And I like that idea of, you can try things on, and if they don't feel right, you can kind of let them go. I've done that with my words, of picking different opposing words at different times. And yeah, I think that I've seen, and I think sort of alluded to this, but for me in particular, the words that we really like strong, determined, go-getter kind of energy, but then also that soft, playful, don't have to be like productive all the time. And so I'm sort of, I've been trying to figure out how to like best mesh those, but I definitely feel myself sort of tapping into those outside of my training practice. And I've also tried on some of the different words from like Savage, and I've tried on some of those other ones, and I'm still kind of playing around to see if I'm gonna keep those or let them go. But yeah, I think it feels, yeah, like awkward at the beginning. At least it did for me, because I was sort of like, how do I just like embrace it? But then somehow, that's why I think the physicality, like that, like embracing it physically first. Not that it's just a physical practice, but I think doing it through your kettlebell, and somehow for me, it was like, because I could really think about it. I was focused on one thing. I was focused on one skill, like snatching. And so I could really think about it. Like I had sort of tunnel vision on, nothing else in the world was mattering at that moment. And so when I was able to kind of do it in such a focused, specific way, I could really feel the difference. And so then I started to figure out how to do that, replicate that in my day-to-day life outside of training.
And it's interesting because it's not so much like this is how you do it. It's try it, see what happens, see what sticks. There's something kind of, I don't know if the word I'm looking for is aloof, but it's kind of like, it's hard to grasp. Whereas that kettlebell, I can touch it, I know if I'm doing it or not. And the other aspect is trusting yourself and listening to your intuition to see, is this clicking, or have I lost the boat on this one? But you don't really know unless you give yourself permission to try. And if you do, and it's not successful, okay, you can try again. And then you really have that opportunity to transform, just like the phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah, and different things might feel better at different words might feel better at different times in your life. And again, that sort of normalizing, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're like being inauthentic or it's not who you are, but it's just things are resonating differently and you want to channel different emotions or feelings. I also have been trying it out a little bit with some of my doula clients too, like maybe not as formally, but a little bit of, childbirths are really, and for those who don't know, I guess I should say doulas. As a doula, I've been assisting people, people who are giving birth, like physically, emotionally, providing education to them. And so basically like a birth companion. And even if they have partners or other people, everyone's life circumstances are different, but having an advocate and someone who can provide you with that information and help you sort of manage the whole experience from pregnancy to postpartum. And so a lot of times, when I talk to my clients and they're like, they have a lot of fears, everyone's fears are different, but it's this like identity shifting period that they're going through that I'm get to be a part of. And so it's really cool. It's really cool to witness. But one of the things that some of the techniques I've tried to like incorporate into my services or how I support people is sort of that embodiment practice of, okay, maybe you don't feel strong right now, but can you pick words that while you're, we practice this before they go into labor, but pick words that, or these opposing words that you want to like be thinking about or channeling, when you're giving birth. And like how can you really start to practice like getting into them and putting them on, so to speak. And it's been cool to see how people have reacted to that and how they've been able to, it's not like their fears go away, but they're able to like put on what a lot of people choose, strength or courage or brave, or, or they choose the word mom, something that they want to kind of reach towards and they know will get them through. And so it's been cool to see how embodiment in this pivotal transition in this transitional period, literally like they're becoming a parent, can play such an important role. And so yeah, it's been cool to see that application. And I'm kind of like curious as I embark on this to become an actual midwife to see like how I can use that as well as some of the other techniques that I've learned from your coaching and just from strength training that have been really beneficial to me, obviously not in giving birth, but in other parts of my life. And are there ways in which I can actually bring in things that I know work into into childbirth? And I think often you think of it as a totally separate, different thing. And certainly it's an experience unlike anything else. But I think there's a lot of self-development and tools that can be used to have more control than you think you can. Yes, there's elements of childbirth that are out of your control for sure. There's a lot of things that you can control. And I think having a toolbox of tools that I've learned, and I'm sure more that I'll learn, I think will be really helpful in hopefully being able to really best support my patients. So I'm excited to apply this to this next chapter of my life.
I'm so excited to hear how the next part goes. And I'm hoping that after you go through all of your schooling, you can come back onto the podcast and be an expert guest for us on that whole topic, because it's so, I didn't even think to put two and two together, but a woman giving birth, talk about instant transformation from going to, womanhood to motherhood. Incredible. So I can't wait to have that next conversation in the future. And as we wrap up this current episode, is there anything else that you would like to say on the topic of transformation to anybody listening right now?
Wow. I feel like I have this like big opportunity to, but I guess, I think I really believe that sometimes you hear things at a time when you really need it. And it's happened to me like with, with some of coaching sessions that we've done where I was like, I know you weren't specifically talking to me, but somehow it really resonated with me and what I'm like going through right now. And so I guess, just to know if you're listening and you're going through some stuff, you're like in this sort of identity crisis or just trying to figure out what's next, or want to have a big goal but haven't taken that first step, know that I've been there and that you can do this. And it's really important to have people in your life who will support you, not just in the goal itself, but in the tools to help you get there. And sometimes you can, I often say, sometimes you have to collect all the dots in your life before you can connect them. And I think that's really true for periods of transformation. And sometimes you don't know how everything's going to fit together or how it's all connected, but trust that it will work out as long as you kind of keep moving forward and also stay true to who you are. And so I would say that. And I hope you also strength train and reach out if you're interested in learning more about doula work. But thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for listening to the Dangerous Women podcast. If you had any groundbreaking takeaways from today's episode, please tag us on social at the Dangerous Women podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe below.